Myths, legends, and the Dioscuri. We know the ancient Greeks were very religious. Like most people in the ancient world, they were very religious and they believed in many different gods. And in this lesson, we'll look more at their myths and legends and the Dioscuri that they believed in. Sparta made use of its legend to justify its claims of leadership in both the Peloponnese and Greece. Sparta was a prominent city-state. They wanted to lead the Peloponnese, they wanted to lead Greece, and so they tried to justify their claims by relating themselves to the gods. It established links between Sparta and the gods or heroes of ancient Greece. Spartan kings were claimed to have been descendant from the semi-divine hero Herakles. So remember, Sparta had two kings, and they were trying to say, oh, we're actually descendants of the god. And so here's a magnificent picture of Herakles, quite a fearsome individual. He looks very big and strong, and the Spartans are trying to say, oh, we're actually descendants of him. That's how special we are. And so they're supposedly, they're trying to say they're descendants of him, one who supposedly returned to Laconia with Dorian invaders. Sparta eventually took many heroes of Troy. Menelaus and Helen had a shrine in Sparta called the Menelaion. Now, this story of Troy is a classic story from ancient Greece. It was written by Homer, and Homer was actually blind. He was an ancient Greek writer who apparently lived around 800 BC, and he wrote the stories. He wrote a few stories. He wrote the Odyssey and he wrote the Iliad. And the Iliad was like the Bible of ancient Greece. There was a lot of religion in it, a lot of stories in it. It was a great book that he wrote. And in this book, the Iliad, he told the story of Troy. And the story was that Helen was a very beautiful woman. She went to Troy, which is located in what we now call Turkey. And the Greeks from Mycenae, mainland Greece, they went and attacked Troy to get Helen back. That's the basic story. And the ruins of Troy have been found. Heinrich Schliemann, a German archaeologist, actually found the ruins of Troy. And he used the Iliad to guide him to those ruins. So we know there was a city called Troy, and there's evidence that the city was burned to the ground. So we know there must have been some sort of war. But obviously we can't ascertain how much of the story is true. I mean, when you read Homer's Iliad, is 80% of it accurate and 20% made up? Is 50% accurate and 50% made up? Maybe only 10% is accurate and the rest is made up. But we at least know there was some city called Troy. We can't know for sure if Helen was a real woman who lived, but we know there was at least the city. And also there's a lot of religion in the book. There's stories about the gods coming down and getting involved. So I think you can't really believe all of it, but it's certainly an interesting story. Now, Menelaus and Helen were two of the characters from the story, and they had a shrine in Sparta which was called the Menelaion. Legends surrounded the military excellence of the Spartan army and the agoge. For example, the suicidal stand of the 300 Spartiates against the overwhelming numbers of the invading Persians at Thermopylae. This is one of the greatest battles in Greek history, one of the most important battles. A classic battle of Greek history. What happened is, in 480 BC, you had the Persians, right? They were the greatest civilization on earth at the time. They ruled the whole Middle East, right? The Persians ruled Egypt. They ruled what we now call Turkey. They ruled Israel and Lebanon and Iraq and what we now call Jordan and Kuwait. They ruled that whole area. They had the greatest civilization on earth, and they were led by a king called Xerxes. And Xerxes wanted to invade Greece, which was a much, much smaller country. And he spent years, apparently, preparing for this war, building up his army. And some sources say he had 2 or 3 million men. Some people say it was only, modern historians say it was probably 200,000 or 300,000 men. But he took his army and he tried to invade Greece. And it wasn't very successful, it didn't work out. And one of the turning points was the Battle of Thermopylae, where this massive Persian army was trying to fight at Thermopylae and they were held off by the Spartans, the 300 Spartans. Now there's a bit more to the story. There were other Greeks there from other cities, but there was only the 300 Spartans. So it's gone down in history as this great battle between the 300 Spartans and the Persians. So it's an extraordinary battle, and one of the great battles of history for Greece. And the Spartans have used it, and they've said, "Oh, look at us! We're so great. We defeated. We held off the Persians." So they've used it to make themselves look good, and I think they do deserve to look good because they did pretty well at that battle. The mysterious figure who supposedly gave Sparta its political and social institutions is Lycurgus. And he gave social institutions including the Great Rhetra, the agoge, and the austere lifestyle. Remember, the Spartans led a very strict lifestyle, not a lot of clothing, food and drink and so on, not a lot of luxury. And we've even got sayings today. People say, "Oh, you're living like a Spartan" or something, or "I've got a Spartan existence." We've used these words in our modern language to describe people who lead a strict lifestyle. They had a very strict lifestyle. The boys were taken away when they were 7. They were trained to be soldiers and so on. And so he's the one who started this. He's the one who apparently started this strict lifestyle. The ancients described him as a real person, even divine. So they even considered him to be a god. But modern historians tend to see him as a mythological figure. I don't really think he was mythological. I think he must have been a real person. I think, you have to have a real person to sort of start it all off and base everything on. I think he was probably a real person. But you never know. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But if you look at even Jesus, who is believed to be the Son of God by Christians, even Jesus, some people question whether he existed. But there is evidence outside of the Bible that says that Jesus existed. You have ancient historians like Tacitus and Josephus who wrote about Jesus. So you do have historical evidence apart from the Bible that says he existed. So, everyone questions this. They say, "Oh, did he really exist?" Some people say, "Did Jesus really exist? Did Lycurgus really exist?" They often question this sort of thing, but I think he must have existed. Jesus must have obviously been a real person, and I think Lycurgus was a real person too. Now, Herodotus was an ancient historian who lived for 2,500 years ago. Herodotus was an ancient Greek historian. He wrote a book called The Histories, and it's an extraordinary book because it's still available today. You can go to a bookstore like Dimmick's bookstore and buy that book today. He is considered the father of history, and he travelled a lot, and he was actually a Greek, so he knew a lot about Greek history. And this is what he said about Lycurgus. He said, "I know not whether to declare you human or divine. Yet I incline to believe, Lycurgus, that you are a god." The perpetuation of his name was one of the most successful frauds in history. So, I guess Herodotus is saying he thinks he's a god and he's maybe not a real person, or maybe he's just saying he was such a great person that he was a god, but he's saying the perpetuation of his name was a fraud. So I guess that's indicating he's not really a real person. But anyway, that was Herodotus' opinion, so that's something interesting to consider. The Dioscuri. You can see the Dioscuri here, naturally on 2 horses. These were the 2 youths, and they were associated with horses, and they were the twin sons of Zeus. So according to this, they were the legend of the twin sons of Zeus, and they were called Castor and Polydeuces. They were the brothers of Helen of Sparta and descendants of Herakles. So once again, they were considered to be descendants of a god. They were associated with the 2 kings of Sparta and descendants of the Dioscuri. The kings were the priests of the Dioscuri. They were associated with young men and the pursuit of horsemanship, athletics, and warfare. So naturally, they've got horses there. They're associated with horsemanship, and they're quite young and healthy. So naturally, they're associated with young men and athletics and so on, and warfare and that type of thing. They also assisted in the protection of Sparta in times of danger. Many hero reliefs have been uncovered by archaeologists. So once again, you can see them here, two youths on the horses. Thousands of votive offerings to the Dioscuri have been found. Artemis, she was the daughter of Zeus and Leto. So she was the daughter of the king of the gods. She was the twin sister of Apollo. So once again, it's very interesting to see all these relationships. You know, you've got these gods who are just in human relationships. They're getting married, they're having children, or they're children of other gods. You know, it's very human-like. And you can see her, she's well-built, athletic, you know, looks strong. She's got an animal there and some weapons on her back. She looks like a powerful figure. Poseidon, he was the god of the sea. His parents were Kronos and Rhea. And Zeus and Demeter were two of his siblings. And once again, you can see him. He's a very strong, very powerful figure with like a perfect athletic body, very muscular, very big and strong. So you can see all that, and he projects such strength. And you can imagine he would be someone that the Greeks, in particular the Spartans, would look up to. He had children such as Triton, Belus, and Atlas. And so it's just amazing how he was a god, but he had all these human characteristics. You know, he wanted to have children, and he did have children, and so on, you know, that are mentioned. So it's just very interesting. And some of these words have come down to us. You know, Atlas, we use that word today. An atlas is like a map where you try to find things. So, you know, we still use some of these words today.